The Week 8 DFS sleepers who will deliver you to the promised land, aka the top of the leaderboards. We got 5 gems for you today, one at each position and a bonus, as well as a pick'em and some specific angles to try out in your Battle Royale drafts this week, where once again, we got a $50,000 top prize to first place. And also, we'll do a quick look back at Week 7, where I think there's a very important lesson to be learned. I'm Pete Overzet. This is the Deposit Kingdom. Let's get to the picks. First up, we're rolling with Denver Broncos quarterback Bo Nix versus Carolina, ADP of 35.9. That makes him the QB 14 on Underdog with a $5,600 salary on DraftKings. And I realize we've had some much more palatable names here in previous weeks, Baker Mayfield, Joe Burrow, Sam Darnold, but bear with me here on Nix. He's currently coming in at just 3% ownership according to the Draft Caddy, despite projecting as the QB7. And there's a lot to like about this spot for the Broncos. They're 10-point home favorites. They're implied to score in 25.75 points, and they're coming off a 10-day rest period after last playing on Thursday Night Football. And over the past 3 games, Nix has just played much better than he did in the first month. He has 4 passing TDs to just 1 interception in that span, and he's also been doing some nice work on the ground. He had 75 yards rushing versus the Saints last week and 61 yards rushing versus the Chargers the week before that. So the field is going to want to play this Denver spot through Javonte Williams. And I do think Javonte's a really good click as well, but he's likely to get very popular before lock because projections are going to love him. So this Nix pivot gives us a chance to capture Denver points in a more creative way. And it is slightly tricky how to stack Nix, but I have one idea I like a lot, and I'll share that when we get to the drafts portion of the video in a little bit. Next up though, we are going to play the Q-Tag game again with Colts running back Jonathan Taylor. He's at Houston this week, ADP of 35, makes him the running back 15 on Underdog. He's got a pricey $7,500 salary on DraftKings, but this is basically the exact same thing we did last week with Aaron Jones. You got a stud running back coming back from an injury, and the combo of the Q tag plus a stiffer matchup means no one wants to click him. And again, if you are new to these videos and you're curious about why we take on the risk of a player who might not play, please go back and watch the injury explainer video, and I'll post a link to that here, and I always mess that up here, and I will also put it in the show notes. It's the video with Evan Ingram on the cover. As of now, Taylor says he's going to play. He got in a full practice on Thursday, which is really good news, but even if he doesn't play, you'll have good swap options, so I like taking on the risk here, especially because it's hard to get bell cow backs at sub 10% ownership, which is exactly what we're getting with Jonathan Taylor this week. And I think with Anthony Richardson's struggles of late, if JT goes, he's going to immediately be the focal point of the offense. So I like to execute Taylor as a last round one-off running back selection if you need a unique piece on an otherwise chalky lineup. And I also don't mind the idea of using him opposite Texans passing game stuff, since we know the Texans need to be pushed to throw. Speaking of which, we are going with Texans wide receiver Tank Dell versus Indianapolis. He's got an ADP of 34.4. He's the wide receiver 16, and he has a $6,300 tag on DraftKings. I can hear you groaning right now. Let me just get through this here. As I was thinking about this pick, I remembered last year I wrote up my weekly hidden gems piece for Fantasy Life, which was very similar to this video as far as going through and finding the best scrolls for Battle Royale. And I wrote about Tank Dell and Dalton Schultz 1 week before they went off. The week they smashed, though, I was too scared to write them up again, because being wrong, doubling down, and being wrong again is not fun. But I just care a lot less about looking dumb these days, because I just want to try to help us all win. So even though we continue to get burned by the Texans, we're going back to the tank well here, guys. The tank well, the Tank Dell, we'll workshop it. And I realized he had a brutal touchdown drop last week, scored 0 points. Trust me, I was right there with you. But his utilization is still strong, and I love this matchup. The Colts have given up some massive games through the air. They gave up 363 yards to Caleb Williams, 312 yards to Fields, and 371 yards to Trevor Lawrence. And Dell just doesn't project that much differently than Stephon Diggs, which you can see here in the established the run projections. And this is what I like to use for Battle Royale ranks. They do a great job over there. And Diggs is getting selected in every draft, whereas Tank Dell is only getting selected in less than a fourth of drafts. So I'm here to tell you we have permission to keep martingale Tank Dell, and I think you can use him as a one-off wide receiver, or I think preferably I would like to skinny stack him with CJ Stroud. Our final position here before we get to the bonus is tight end, and we are going with Spicy Margs himself, Mr. Kyle Pitts. At Tampa Bay, he has an ADP of 35.4, makes him the tight end 10 on the week, and his price tag on DraftKings is $4,400. And I realize going with Kyle Pitts, I am just asking for pain this week. I will say tight end is tricky for scroll down options. Evan Ingram looks really good, but he's just outside our threshold of 30% that I'm generally trying to find gems below as far as ownership. So our next best option is Pitts. He's coming in right now at less than 20% ownership, despite projecting a lot better than that. And I actually don't think this is as gross as you think. I know if we can separate all of the times Kyle Pitts has burned us, but what he's done over the last 3 games is pretty impressive. He has an 85% route participation and a 19% target share. That's resulted in a utilization score of 8.0. And by the way, if you're not familiar, utilization score is a great metric at Fantasy Life created by Dwayne McFarland, and it gives us a quick snapshot of a player's usage, and it also has predictive capabilities. And that score puts him on par with guys like Trey McBride and Travis Kelce as far as from a utilization perspective. So whatever kind of, stigma or thought of Kyle Pitts you had in your head from the first few weeks of the season, things are different these past few weeks. So how to execute, I think with tight end, you can always use them as a one-off tight end at the end of the draft if you want a unique piece. You could also skinny stack him with Kirk Cousins, especially when you consider that most people this week will be using Drake London as just a one-off wide receiver at the top of their drafts. Let's wrap up with our bonus before we get into the drafts and our takeaways from last week. We're rolling with maybe a bit of a surprise here. Chargers wide receiver Ladd McConkey versus New Orleans. He has an ADP of 35.9, makes him the wide receiver 28 on Underdog, and very nice price tag on DraftKings as well. For those of you playing over there, only $5,100. And I'm kind of torn with this pick because this bonus pick should probably be a running back because it is a really strong 2 running back week. But other than Taylor, there are just really no running backs who are slam dunks who also project for less than 30% ownership, which is what I like to aim for with these picks. Guys like James Conner and David Montgomery nearly made the cut here, but I can't resist this setup for Ladd McConkey at sub 1% ownership. McConkey is yet to have a blow-up game, but his utilization is rock solid. He's averaging 25% of the targets and a 25% targets per route run on the year, and it does feel like the PPR scam game from Ladd is coming soon, and I want to be ahead of it. And I think similar to people wanting to play the Broncos through Javonte Williams instead of Knicks, people are going to want to play the Chargers through J.K. Dobbins as opposed to going through the passing game. And I understand why. The Chargers are 7-point home favorites versus a really bad Saints defense. I think Dobbins is a good play. Like Javonte, in other scenarios, those guys would have been our gems, but they're going to be 40-50% owned by the time this contest closes, and I want to dig a little bit deeper for you guys. And I think it's fair to ask, same thing with the Bo Nix, what if the Chargers don't get all of their points through the ground? What if some of it comes through the air? So I really like McConkey here, who is going to go really overlooked. I think you can use him as a one-off piece. I don't think you need to stack him with Justin Herbert in 6-person contests. That's probably a little too cute, though I think it's fine if you're playing in some of those 12-person drafts like the Dog Bowl or the Squib. And I'll also say these guys look like a great vomit stack on DraftKings where they're really cheap. I wrote these guys up for Fantasy Life this week. If you want to do the Herbert, Disley, and Ladd McConkey stack, that looks like a really good points per dollar play. As always, I do like to build a pick'em entry with all of our gems. The thought here is, sometimes we'll be right, but they won't win us a tournament just because you do have to be so perfect to win a lot of these contests. But if we get all of our pieces moving in the right direction, we can still profit over on the pick'ems. And so I'm going to go with 3 here. We are going to use Bo Nix higher than 26.5 rushing yards. He's absolutely smashed this number in back-to-back games. We're going to go Tank Dell higher than 55.5 receiving yards. I think with his ADOT, he can get here in a couple of catches. And then we're going Kyle Pitts higher than 41.5 receiving yards. He's been well ahead of this of late as well. And I should say, we didn't have anything up in the lobby when I made this video as far as Lad McConkey and Jonathan Taylor. All they had were touchdowns. So if you are feeling spicy and you want to add Lad TD at 1.5x or a JT TD at 1.08 is what I saw it at, by all means, but we're just going to rock with these core three here for the official pick'em. And I should also say, make sure you check in your underdog lobby right now if you have a pick'em special, because there has been a ton in there. I actually was able to use a freebie for our pick of 3. So I was able to add a 4th pick that was just a free pick. So it's still the 3, but you're getting now a 6x turning into a 10x. There's also some boosts in the lobby. Sometimes you'll get a 35% boost or something in that ballpark. So before you press enter, make sure you are applying any freebies or boosts that you have. And if all of this is gibberish and you're new to Underdog, they are always offering up to a $1,000 deposit match when you use promo code Pete, as well as an additional pick'em special. So if you guys haven't signed up, if this looks like fun and you want to dabble with us in Battle Royale and pick'em, use promo code Pete for up to a $100 deposit match. All right, for this week's Evergreen strategy session, I want to talk about a harsh reality. And that reality is some weeks, it will be impossible to win no matter how good you play. Let me explain. In week 7, the plays you had to have to win the big battle royale were almost completely off my board. Joe Mixon had an ADP of 16.7. He was the RB5. Jahmyr Gibbs had an ADP of 28.6. He was the RB8. David Njoku had an ADP of 32.5. He was the tight end 5. Across my 227 teams that I drafted last week, I had 2.2% Mixon, 3.1% Njoku, and 4.8% Gibbs. So a pretty massive fade stance on all 3 of those players. These players all fell into the exact dead zone range of ADP that I typically try to avoid, and why we are constantly preaching to scroll down around here. Here's the cap as well. If you guys actually want some scroll down merch, we do have a mug, pint glass, shirts, hats, flat build hats as well. I got a link to the scroll merch down below. But this range of players traditionally features players who aren't elite scorers, who also don't project that much differently than the players going behind them. So it's the worst of both worlds. They don't have the ceiling of the top guys, and they also have an ownership premium relative to the guys going after them. And we can look here at how this was playing out last week. Mixon was getting selected in 100% of drafts, while Aaron Jones, who projected better, was rarely getting drafted. Jahmyr Gibbs was getting selected in almost 100% of drafts, while Jordan Mason, who projected better, was rarely getting selected. And then Njoku was getting selected in 100% of drafts, while Kobe Parkinson projected for just 0.1 point less. 0.1 point less. So I'm always going to fade players like that if I can get similar projection at a fraction of the ownership. And to just further put this in perspective, last week there were 666 Gibbs and Mixon teams. That's a pretty frequented combo for a pair of running backs, because you can compare that to the Mason and Jones teams. There was only 81 of that duo. And the Mason Jones teams projected for more points. And so what this all means is that there are going to be weeks, like week 7, where those fragile plays hit and you get dusted, you lose. And that's okay. We need to be okay with that, because the goal here is to have a consistent, repeatable process. So when that chalk doesn't hit, we have a very clear path to first place. Whereas on weeks where the chalk does hit, you still have to be perfect in your 3 to 4 other slots, because so many people have that same chalk combo. Here's to hoping we avoid the Battle Royale dead zone crushing us in week 8, although the kids do tell me it's spooky season right now, so who knows. All right, before we hop in some drafts, let's shout out the winner of the Deposit Kingdom Weekly League for week 7. Our champ is Dubious18. Dubious18 rolled out a naked Jordan Love, Barkley and Gibbs at running back, Amon-Ra St. Brown and DK Metcalf at wide receiver, and David Njoku at tight end. I really like this Gibbs Amon-Ra correlation, though I will say I would almost always finish this team with either Jared Goff or Geno Smith instead of taking a naked Jordan Love. And I'll also mention this team would have still won if they did Jared Goff or Geno Smith. And my thought is when you made that big of a bet on, say, 2 Lions players or on Metcalf, I prefer the correlation at QB as opposed to having to get another additional thing right with a random QB hitting. And I realize I'm nitpicking here, and I want to use this as a place to celebrate the winners, but I do want to mention because I think long-term, you'll make more money if you correlate your last round quarterback selection than trying to nail a one-off quarterback, especially if that quarterback doesn't have huge rushing upside. I think it's a different conversation if it's a Jalen Hurts, if it's a Josh Allen, and those guys were available in the 6th round. So if you are going to take a pocket passer, you might as well just correlate with some of the players already on your team. All right, let's get to the drafts now where we have 3 interesting angles to try out in week 8. We got that $50,000 top prize here again in the Battle Royale Week 8 contest. And let's hop in here now and check this out. We are going to be starting this off. Our first idea, I am calling this the dollar store Lamar and Henry. So a very popular combo in drafts this week is going to be Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. One, those guys have just been hitting a lot together, but their ADPs actually correlate now as well, with Lamar going at pick 11, which is right around where the one hole drafter is normally picking. So here's my arbitrage version of it this week. We already talked about Bo Nix and his rushing upside. I talked about how I like Javonte. I like the idea of pairing Bo Nix and Javonte together. And this is a thought of what if we can just capture all of the Broncos touchdowns in one fell swoop? All of the passing touchdowns obviously are going to be tied to Nix, and then hopefully all of the rushing touchdowns tied to Javonte. And if we mix in maybe a rushing touchdown from Nix there, which he's been doing a lot on the ground, as far as picking up rushing yards, I think there is a lot to like here. So I'm going to put Javonte Williams and Bo Nix in our queue. Those are going to be our last 2 picks. We'll take Javonte in the 5th round, Bo Nix in the 6th. And now we know that we can look to other positions for the rest of our picks. All right, so we are on the clock here. We can go ahead and take Barkley. We'll take Barkley, and we know we will not be selecting another running back because our last running back spot is going to go to Javonte. So this means the rest of our non-Javonte Bo Nix picks will be a wide receiver and a tight end. So we will go from there. I think this would be a good team to get an elite tight end, an elite wide receiver on. I would love to get Bowers here. He has an ADP of 13. Maybe we could grab him at 11. Hopefully we'll get one of these top wide receivers as well. If we miss out on Drake London, could potentially do T. Higgins. And T. Higgins sneakily does not project that much differently than Jamar Chase this week. I think T. Higgins is a very strong selection. Although I will say Barkley with Higgins is fairly popular. Over on Lulz, which is a show I do with Brick75, the professional DFS player over on my live stream channel, their new tool, the Draft Caddy, which we're seeing here, now has added the ability to look at draft ownership combos. And that's when I was just referencing the Lamar and Henry and also the T. Higgins and Barkley. I'll actually pull that up in a second when we get done with this draft, just so you guys can see what I'm talking about there. But I think it's a very valuable tool for kind of figuring out maybe random combos the field is getting funneled to that they shouldn't. So Bowers does go. Wow, Bowers goes at 7. Amon-Ra almost slides to us. We'll just take Drake London here. We mentioned in the video we like Kyle Pitts on teams where we're not necessarily going to have Kyle Pitts. Certainly like getting access to Drake London, who's really kind of emerged as a bigger focal point of that offense than he had even in previous years. Let's go ahead. I do kind of want to sidestep the Barkley and Higgins because I think that's going to be so overused relative to what it should be. Let's go ahead and grab our tight end here. We'll do Travis Kelce instead. And then we know we'll be doing one more wide receiver, and then this team will be all set. But I'm just going to quickly show you guys this. So when you get the Draft Caddy, which includes the overlays that you guys see on my screen, they now have added, this is when you click on the settings, you can see ownership for individual players, but also 2 players. And so you can see here as you search at the top for the most popular plays, or as far as what are most frequented here, here is a Lamar Jackson with Bijan near the top. There's a Joe Burrow with T. Higgins. Some of these make sense, right? Like Joe Burrow with T. Higgins makes sense. A.J. Brown with Jalen Hurts. But something like Brock Bowers with Jordan Love, that's just a random thing by ADP. And here's what I'll show you when I was saying about the Barkley. So when you go and make your first pick, I can go search Barkley. So Barkley's often paired with Lamar, Bowers, Bijan, Drake London. So these are picks here. Actually, sorry, I was wrong. The one I was thinking of was AJ Brown with T. Higgins. So Barkley with T. Higgins doesn't look quite as popular here. It was AJ Brown is with T. Higgins almost a third of the time, which seems like too much. So maybe I should have considered T. Higgins in that spot, but you get my point. It's something that's nice to review there when you get a chance. All right, we are back on the clock here. Let's go ahead and grab a wide receiver, and then we will be done here. I like Brian Thomas a lot this week. I think Brian Thomas is a very nice selection versus Green Bay. He's been playing awesome. So we will go with Brian Thomas, and then we will be able to push the plane here because the drafter behind us already has 2 running backs. We're going to select Javonte Williams, and then I promise you, no one is going to select Bo Nix. Although I feel like I say that every week. I'm like, no one would take this, and then our guy gets sniped. But I'm pretty sure Bo Nix is not going to get sniped from us. So we can check back here in a second, but this team will end up being Barkley, Javonte at running back, Drake London, and Brian Thomas at wide receiver, Travis Kelce at tight end, and Bo Nix at quarterback. So our correlation coming from Bo Nix and Javonte Williams, and then everything else is just uncorrelated, trying to get ceiling games from Barkley, London, Thomas, and Kelce. All right, let's hop in another one here. I should also mention, I forgot to mention it when we were reviewing the Deposit Kingdom contest. By the time you guys are watching this video, the Week 8 Deposit Kingdom contest will be in the lobby here on Underdog. You just go to the NFL tab and you scroll over here, and it'll be hanging out at the end. It's a $10 3 max contest, and I'll always review the winning teams here on the Deposit Kingdom videos, as well as my portfolio review show, which I do every Monday morning on the Pete Overzet YouTube channel. All right, our second idea here, we're going to call this one The Texans Finally Throw. And this has been a source of frustration lately when you play the Texans, and they have not really been pushed. So they've been able to have success running the ball. This posits, what if they finally get in a negative game script? What if they have to throw? And that's why we're going to go ahead and we're going to roll with Jonathan Taylor, Tank Dell, and CJ Stroud. So this is a very kind of simple thing. We've already talked about Taylor and liking him this week. If he has a lot of success on the ground in Indianapolis, is scoring, then we know that the Texans are finally going to capitulate and throw here a little bit. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to wrap up with Tank, Stroud, and Taylor. This means we know we're going to have to be getting our tight end early. I will try to get Bowers maybe with pick 8 here just to make sure we can lock up an early tight end on this build, and then we'll see how the rest of this draft goes. And as we wait for this one, let's go and see if we did, in fact, get our guy here. Bo Nix. There you go. So I didn't want to leave any of you completionists hanging. We did get Bo Nix on this roster with the Bo Nix and Javonte Williams correlation. No Davis Maddock in our drafts today. He normally finds a way to sneak in to them as we record these videos. I got my Draft Caddy overlay, like I was mentioning. For those of you guys who are new, the red number is the implied team total for the team here. So you can see the Texans, 25.5 team total. That's one of the huge reasons I'm into them. And then the blue number is the spread. So they're 5-point favorites, 25.5 team total. It's just kind of nice little screener. You're looking at 2 players. And obviously the projection, the rank is baking this in, but it's nice to just quickly get that reminder. And you can see some pretty bad ones. Like you go look at Chuba Hubbard this week. What is their team total? We'll have it populate here in a second, but it's not pretty. is what I'll tell you. And then the green number is the projected ownership, what we're talking about a lot. So you can see here with our trio, Tank Dell sub 30%, CJ Stroud around 10%, and Jonathan Taylor sub 10%. All right, last draft we did Barkley. This is a nice fall for him, but I get bored when I'm making these videos and I like doing slightly different stuff. Let's do Tyreek Hill here. I think Tyreek Hill is undervalued this week. I think he should be, I don't know, 102, 103. Certainly not ADP of 7. Tyreek Hill with Tua has just been electric. He's been lights out. He's been a regular 101, 102. And now you're getting him with Tua back, and the market is kind of baking in, well, what if it doesn't, quite work out? Let's see. I am torn because I'd like a Bowers share, but Amon-Ra here is nice. We're just bouncing around, so let's grab Bowers. If I was doing a ton of these drafts, which I will be, I'll take Amon-Ra there. You'll also end up with a ton of Amon-Ra and Tyreek if you're aggressively taking Tyreek like I am when I've only done a few drafts this week. This is when I really start ramping up, but I had already noticed that Reek Amon-Ra combo is fairly popular, at least when I'm drafting. So we'll grab Tyreek with Bowers here, and then that'll give us a little flexibility for this other pick. We know it'll be a running back or wide receiver, and then we'll finish with Dell, Stroud, Taylor. I think maybe a good pick to get on here. Yeah, I don't mind this running back range. I do think Gibbs looks good to me again. I wouldn't mind getting him on this team. Jaden Reed is another guy I like this week. He could be our third wide receiver if we wanted to go that way, but it does really set up, I think, to be a nice 2 RB week. So ideally, Steel Cat here can't take a running back. Let's see if Paulie does something else. Okay, yeah, they go Kelsey. So we'll grab Gibbs. I'll grab Gibbs here. And so now this team is going to draft itself, because we are going to end up with Tank, Stroud, and JT to round out our Gibbs, Hill, Brock. And again, this is one of the things about scrolling down, right? Like, this is a good example. This is what most people will see on the clock at this spot. Not a single one of the players we're about to click is even viewable on the screen. You literally have to scroll down to find these guys, which just means that people aren't going to get to these combos as much as they probably should, because especially if you're on your phone and you're just, swiping as you're on the clock, it's hard not to be anchored to that ADP. So I realize that is obviously the prevailing theme of this entire video series, but it's always good to kind of highlight it in practical ways of like, these players you're clicking are not on the screen. And I do like it juxtaposed to Diggs, right? We can see the ownership there. Diggs almost 80% ownership, going to be drafted in all of these contests, why Dell isn't. So I certainly think Diggs should be drafted ahead of Dell, but then you start to factor in the ownership percentages, and that pendulum can, quickly swing back in the other direction. I guess the only thing you have to worry about here sometimes, if you are trying to set up Stroud to Dell, is if the Diggs drafter then double taps Stroud and Diggs. That's where I could lose it here. So maybe the strategy, if you are doing this, is you actually take Stroud first, because then someone's way less likely to steal your quarterback. But yeah, this week is very deep at quarterback. Obviously with the 13 games and no buys, we have a ton of options. Tight end is really deep. That's why it's kind of crazy to me to even be able to get a guy like Kyle Pitts as tight end 10, just because generally any tight end with a pulse has been a top 6 tight end, but things are just so deep this week. All right, Paulie should be taking Jalen Hurts here, so we should be fine to get CJ Stroud. And the drafter behind us has both quarterback and running back, so no worry or concern there. And we will get both of our players here. CJ Stroud at quarterback. Oh, I guess I didn't push the plane in time. So we will manually make these picks. Now we'll put it on, and our team is going to be complete. So our thesis here, Jonathan Taylor gets it going on the ground, CJ Stroud and Tank Dell in comeback mode. And the beauty of all of those picks in conjunction is that they are all not being drafted at a high frequency. So I like the story that tells. And then we get in 3 high-end picks there at the top, Gibbs, Tyreek, and Bowers. All right, let's do one more here, and then we will get on our way. This final one, we are going to call the wide receiver tight end double scroll. So I wanted to find an arbitrary way to draft both of the other gems here. And it's similar to what we've done with the double running back scrolls, which is just, again, taking 2 scrolls at the end. And we're going to do Kyle Pitts and Lad McConkey as our final 2 picks here. Obviously, no direct correlations between those 2 guys, but just, again, a pair that will not be seen together on a lot of teams just because of their ADPs. But I think both really good picks that are fun to pair in conjunction. So the only other thing we'll have to figure out here is what we want to do at quarterback. I don't love Cousins this week. I don't love Herbert this week. So we might try to set up another stack here instead, but we know we'll be finishing our draft with these 2 guys. Looks like no Bo Sox joining us in a bunch of these drafts, as is Luke Big Shots. I do not get in a lot of early drafts other than kind of for research purposes, getting comfortable with the slate. But I personally really like drafting over the weekend, Friday nights, Saturdays, and then all of my like single entry, 3 max, the higher stake stuff when I'm doing DeBomb. I like doing those on Sunday morning. Max amount of information, etc. Jamar Chase, Breece Hall, Derrick Henry, and Barkley go. I'm gonna keep taking Tyreek Hill. Maybe on this one we could do. Yeah, I like this. We'll do a mix-in Tyreek Hill. It's always kind of nice to do opposite of your stack, right? Like the lineup we just told tells the story of the Texans being forced to pass, but there's certainly scenarios where they're having success on the ground and they don't have to pass. So again, your portfolio can contain multitudes. It can contain these different ideas, different stories each lineup tells. In this one, we still have Tyreek Hill paired with our Texan stuff, but through this one, we're going to play the running game with Joe Mixon, and through that other one, we're obviously playing through the fantasy game. So we're good at tight end. We're good at running back and wide receiver. It's basically flex and quarterback, and then deciding how we want to handle quarterback. We could do Tua with Tyreek. Tua looks like here via the Draft Caddy we see is getting drafted sub 20% of the time. So I always like stacking up my top pass catcher with their quarterback, especially if they are not getting drafted a ton. But we could also see here if we find a different quarterback pass catcher combo we like more. Something like on a team where I know I'm going to have 2 really unique pieces, I would say some of this mid-tier I like would be Jaden Reed and Jordan Love. I think that could be one we did here. But let's just see what is available to us here at this 3-4 turn. Lamar sliding, we definitely scoop him up if he slid to us here. Josh Allen, Amari Cooper, when we were looking at the combos earlier, that was one of the most popular combos on the week. So I don't think I'm going to do that. I kind of like the, Jaden Reed went. Bummer. There goes that idea. Man, Jaden Reed I start talking about a guy I want to take, and he goes 11 picks ahead of ADP. Let's do this. I think Kareem Hunt is a good pick. You know what? Actually, I want to do something. Let's see. I'm gonna do Achane. we are going to go in on the Dolphins with this team. So we are going to do, I don't think anyone's going to take Tua from us. I'm trying to think who we should do first, Tua or Pitts. I think both of them will make it back to us, but let's go ahead and just do, we'll do Tua here and stick with our scroll of Kyle Pitts and Lad McConkey. So there's very few situations where I often do the quarterback, running back, wide receiver pairing. And I want to be more open to it. My best lineup last week was actually in the fullback dive, and it was a Goff, Gibbs, and Amon-Ra. And I had selected Gibbs and Amon-Ra on that team, and then was kind of scrambling at quarterback, and I didn't have any good options. And I'm like, I've already made this bet on the Lions. I might as well take Goff here. And so I think the same logic applies here. Obviously, Achane can score rushing touchdowns in a way that could keep Tua from being necessary, even if Achane and Tyreek Hill both hit. We saw that play out actually a lot last year. But I also like the scenarios where, what if Achane catches a rushing touchdown? That's definitely in his bag. What if Tyreek Hill scores 2? What if Tua, puts up 26, 27 points here? I mean, last week was an absurdly low scoring week for the quarterback position. I think the team that won had Hurts at like 23 points. That team we were reviewing from the Deposit Kingdom, had 18 points from Jordan Love. Geno would have won from him, at 17.9 points. Goff had 18 points. So if you get a low scoring week like we have been, certainly through the passing game, getting like 24 or 25 from your quarterback when it's paired to the skill position players going off, I think is completely viable. So we're going to do that. Tua, Achane, Tyreek. Love that trio over on DraftKings. They're absurdly priced on DraftKings this week. And I actually think they're discounted on Underdog as well. I don't really see any reason to be discounting them more than we would otherwise. And it's that classic, hey, Tua hasn't been on the field for a few weeks, so let's, push everyone down more than they should be. So we'll see here. The only sweat now is if we were to get sniped on Kyle Pitts. I really doubt that's going to happen, but you never know. Let's see here. A Josh Allen team. Would they take Trey McBride? Or would they scroll down to Dalton Kincaid? They go Mark Andrews. So we get our two guys, Kyle Pitts and Lad McConkey. And here's the team. Tua at quarterback, Joe Mixon, Achane at running back, wide receiver, Tyreek Hill, Lad McConkey, tight end, Kyle Pitts. I like this team. We get some high-end guys in Joe Mixon and Tyreek Hill. We build out a correlation around Tyreek Hill in the Dolphins with Achane and Tua. And then we get a couple of scrolls at the end, Lad and Kyle Pitts. And that is going to do it for our drafts today. If you guys want to get my last minute thoughts on the week 8 slate, I'm doing a DFS cram for YouTube members on my Pete Overzet live stream channel. That goes live every Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. We go through the slate from both an Underdog and DraftKings perspective. I share my favorite plays, any updated thoughts, guys I've gotten onto that weren't on my radar, when I record this video. I react to inactive news at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. We also do a couple more drafts, build some pick'ems. The link is down below. You just go to that channel and join the Hand Builder and Opto Bros tier. You'll get access to that show. Also, my DFS After Dark interview series on Saturday nights. I'm having my pal Mike Zakarian from Team Hold on this week. He does a ton of NBA Underdog stuff, also is in the NFL street, so we will have a fun conversation there. And that's it. Good luck in week 8, guys. Let me know in the comments, who are your hidden gems for this week?